Hi Reddit. I'm 29, and 3 months ago I woke up from a coma. The doctors said it was a miracle I pulled through. They'd told my family I might never wake up. But I did. I don't remember much from the accident, a hit and run while I was walking to work. I was in the ICU for 2 weeks, then stabilized in long-term care. When I finally opened my eyes, my mom cried. My younger sister, Julia, was the first person I saw clearly. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, but she smiled and called me Miracle Girl. At first, I was too weak to speak. I had to learn to walk again, retrain my memory in small ways, and reorient to everything that changed in the months I'd been unconscious. Julia was by my side for most of it, always smiling, bringing me little updates about my apartment, my friends, even my job. She said she'd handled everything while I was gone. That my boss had been super supportive, and my friends had all pitched in to keep my rent paid and things in order. I was so overwhelmed with gratitude, I didn't ask too many questions. But now, back home and slowly piecing things together, I'm starting to feel like something is very, very wrong. Like, it's not just that Julia stepped into my life while I was out. It's that she never actually stepped back out. And I think, no, I know, she doesn't want to. When I was finally discharged from the hospital and moved back into my apartment, Julia had already cleaned and set everything up for me. She'd even stocked the fridge with all my favorite snacks, refilled my prescriptions, and left a little welcome home card on the kitchen table with a drawing of us as kids. It was sweet, thoughtful, almost too thoughtful. At first, I chalked it up to gratitude. I mean, she'd basically put her life on hold for me. According to my mom, Julia had been the one dealing with my landlord, coordinating with my job, and fielding all the messages from friends. She'd even stayed in my apartment to make sure it didn't sit empty. It was weird, though. When I started going through my stuff, it didn't feel like my place anymore. Things were in the wrong spots. Not messy, just different. My books were rearranged. My kitchen drawers had new utensils. My closet had clothes I'd never seen before, cuter, trendier, not my style at all. And some of my old favorites were missing. When I brought it up, Julia just laughed and said she'd gotten bored one weekend and Marie Kondo'd the whole place. She said she donated some of my outdated stuff and bought a few new things to make it feel fresh when I came home. She even said she'd been wearing some of my clothes, just to feel close to me. I wanted to believe her. I tried to believe her. But the next day, I got a call from someone named Eric. I didn't recognize the number, but when I picked up, he said, "Hey, why haven't you texted me back? I've been worried." I had no idea who he was. He said we'd been talking for a while before my accident, but I didn't remember ever meeting him. And when I checked my phone history, there were texts. Hundreds of them. Flirty, romantic, intimate messages, all from me to Eric. Except, I never wrote a single one of them. And that's when I realized, while I was unconscious, someone had been living my life, pretending to be me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, phone in hand, scrolling through the messages between me and Eric. They went back months. There were selfies. Not many, just a few casual ones. But it was clear from the angles that they weren't taken by me. My sister and I don't look exactly alike, but in the right lighting, with the right filters? Yeah, she could pass as me. Especially to someone who'd never seen me in person. In the texts, she used my tone. My slang. She even referenced things from my childhood, personal, specific stuff. Things only I or someone in my family would know. I kept reading, my stomach turning. At one point, I told Eric I loved him. That I wished they could meet, but that things were complicated right now. There were vague excuses, mentioning health stuff, being overwhelmed, needing time. She kept him emotionally hooked, just enough to keep him close. The last message was from the night before. He had sent, "Still thinking about you. Hope you're okay." And then it hit me. Julia didn't just take care of my life. She became me. I started checking other accounts, Instagram, email, even my Venmo. Some of the passwords were changed. Others weren't. But in the places I could access, I saw her fingerprints everywhere. Posts made on my behalf. Comments replying to friends. Little notes about how I was healing slowly but grateful. I hadn't written a single one of them. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream. But something told me to wait. Because this was bigger than just a few messages or borrowed clothes. Julia didn't just hold my place in my life. She tried to replace me. And I needed to know how far she'd gone. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I thanked Julia for breakfast. I asked about how she managed the rent while I was in the hospital. She said it was no big deal, that my job had kicked in some emergency support and she'd handled the rest. When I asked about my work, she just waved it off and said, "They've been great." Totally understanding. I told them you'd be back soon. But when I checked my work email later that afternoon, it was empty. No welcome back message. No updates. No replies to my check-in. So I dug deeper. I remembered my old coworker Brian, the kind who always overshares on social media. I found his latest post and messaged him from a burner account I made the night before, just something simple. Hey, do you know if my name is still working there? He responded a few minutes later, she quit 3 weeks ago. I stared at the message like it was a joke. Quit? I never quit. I never even knew I had the option to quit. And then came the next part of Brian's message. Yeah, she sent out an email to everyone. Said she needed to prioritize her health and was starting something new. Sad to see her go, she was awesome. So now, according to everyone at my job, I had sent that email. Except I hadn't. But someone did. And it only got worse from there. That night, Julia went out to meet some friends. Said they were mine, but I didn't recognize any of the names. So while she was gone, I went through her room. I didn't even hesitate. I was past the point of guilt. What I found made my hands shake. She had my journals. The ones I'd kept since high school. My notebooks. Old letters. Childhood photos I hadn't seen in years, all packed neatly in a box labeled for inspiration. And tucked inside that box? A printed spreadsheet. It had 3 columns. Asterisk, people who believe I'm her. Asterisk, needs more work. Asterisk, off limits. My name was nowhere on it. Because to Julia, I was already gone. I barely slept that night. My body was still, but my brain wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that spreadsheet, her neat handwriting labeling people in my life like they were chess pieces. Names I recognized, coworkers, college friends, even my ex-boyfriend, Brandon. And next to Brandon's name? 2 words, too risky. I didn't know what that meant. Had she tried to reach out to him? Pretend to be me? Or had he figured it out? That morning, I found my answer. I reached out to Brandon from the burner account. I didn't pretend. I told him it was really me, that I needed to talk. I asked if he could meet up, and to my surprise, he said yes. We met at a small coffee shop across town, one he and I used to go to when we were still dating. He looked startled when he saw me walk in. Like he'd seen a ghost. He said he'd already talked to me a month ago. That I had called him out of nowhere and said I wanted closure. Said I appreciated the time we had together and hoped he was doing well. Said I was cutting ties to old emotional attachments. Brandon believed it was me. He had no reason not to. I told him everything. Well, not everything. I couldn't find the words for all of it. But I told him I had been in a coma, that I'd only just come home. That I didn't send that message. That I hadn't talked to anyone. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked me the same thing that had been screaming in my head for days. Why would Julia do this? And I told him the truth. I didn't know. But the more I thought about it, the more I remembered the way Julia always hovered on the sidelines growing up. The younger sister, always cute, always helpful, but never me. I was the one who left home first. The one who got the scholarships, the friends, the apartment, the job. She was always there, but never the center of anything. Until I disappeared. And when I did, she stepped in. Not to hold my place, but to take it. And no one noticed. No one questioned it. Not until now. After meeting with Brandon, everything shifted. He believed me. It took a while, more than a few awkward silences and some suspicious glances, but once I showed him the messages Julia sent from my accounts, the spreadsheet photo, and even one of the selfies she sent to Eric wearing my necklace, he stopped doubting. He asked the question I'd been too afraid to ask myself, what's the endgame here? And I didn't have an answer. Was Julia planning to live as me, forever? Start a new life under my name? Phase me out quietly, tell people I had some breakdown, or maybe ship me off to a care facility and take control of what little I had? I didn't want to believe she was capable of that. But everything I'd seen said otherwise. When I got home, I acted normal. I had to. Until I figured out what to do next, I couldn't risk tipping her off. But then I made a mistake. I left my phone unattended in the kitchen while I was in the shower. Julia must have seen the texts between Brandon and me. There was a short message at the top of the thread I hadn't deleted. I have proof. She's pretending to be me. That evening, she was too quiet. No, how was your day? No updates, no cheerful talk. Just a weird smile and an offer to make dinner like old times. And when I said I wasn't hungry, she just smiled wider and said, it's okay. I'll bring it to you later. I froze. That's not something she would normally say. It was too careful. Like she was testing me. Later that night, I checked my room. The windows were locked from the outside. The chain on the front door had been switched out, one of those heavy-duty ones that I didn't remember installing. My spare keys were missing from the drawer. That's when I realized. She wasn't just pretending to be me. She was preparing to erase me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I stayed in the chair by the window, fully dressed, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Julia didn't knock on my door. She didn't bring dinner. She didn't say goodnight. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard movement. Quiet footsteps. The squeak of the kitchen drawer, the one where the knives are. Then silence. Every nerve in my body went cold. This wasn't just identity theft. This was something darker. Something dangerous. I grabbed my bag, the one I'd already packed in secret, just in case, and slipped my phone inside. No shoes, no noise. I crept to the window and tried to pry it open. Locked, double-latched. The second one was new. Installed while I was still in the hospital? Or recently? I didn't wait to find out. I tiptoed to the front door. Same problem. The new chain was locked tight from the inside, no way to open it without making noise. And then I heard it. The click of the hallway light. She was awake. She was watching. I backed into my room and pressed myself against the door, heart racing. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call the police without sounding insane. Hi, my sister lived as me while I was in a coma and now might be planning to lock me in my own house? Yeah. That'd go over great. So I did the only thing I could think of. I called Brandon. No words. Just one ring, then hung up. That was our signal. He'd promised me earlier that day, if anything felt wrong, anything, to call. No questions. 5 minutes later, I heard a car pull up outside. Headlights flooded the front of the apartment. And then? The front door opened. Unlocked. Chain gone. Julia stood in the entryway, perfectly calm, like nothing had happened. She blinked at the car, looked back at me, and said the words that made my blood run cold. You weren't supposed to ruin this. Brandon stormed in before I could answer her. He didn't say a word to Julia. Just walked past her, straight to me, eyes wide like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I was still frozen in place, bag in hand, heart punching my ribs from the inside out. Julia didn't flinch. She even smiled at him. Told him it was so sweet of him to come over. Like none of this was real. Like we were all just part of her play. But then she turned to me and said something that chilled me to my core. You can't keep both lives. You've already been replaced once. What makes you think anyone would notice if it happened again? Brandon stepped in front of me, protective. I watched his jaw clench like he was forcing himself not to lose it. He told her we were leaving. That I was going back with him and she needed to stay the hell away from me. Julia shrugged, said fine. But her eyes? They didn't blink. They didn't move from mine. We walked out together, and as I crossed the threshold, I had this strange, dizzy moment, like stepping out of someone else's dream. My own apartment didn't even smell like home anymore. Brandon helped me into his car and locked the doors. We didn't speak for a full 5 minutes. Then I asked him the question that had been burning at the back of my mind since I saw that spreadsheet. How many people think she's me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out his phone and opened a social media post. It was a photo of Julia, dressed in my clothes, sitting in my favorite coffee shop, captioned, "Still healing, still standing." Hashtag my comeback year. Hundreds of likes, comments from people I hadn't seen in years, people I thought cared. All of them saying the same thing. So proud of you. You're amazing. You're stronger than ever. Every one of them believed she was me. Every one of them was wrong. The days that followed were a blur. I stayed at Brandon's, barely able to sleep, constantly checking the locks, jumping at every noise. My body was safe, but my mind? It hadn't caught up. Because the more I looked, the worse it got. Julia had buried me online. Every photo of me on social media had been replaced or archived. My Instagram highlights? Gone. My professional profiles? Changed. She'd even updated my LinkedIn to reflect the resignation she'd sent from my job. She hadn't just borrowed my life, she'd rewritten it. And then came the worst part. I tried to log into my main email, the one linked to my bank, my medical records, everything important. Password denied. Security question changed. Two-factor authentication rerouted to another number. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I couldn't even prove I was myself anymore. The digital version of me, the one people see, trust, believe in, wasn't me at all. It was her. Julia had taken everything. Not just my stuff. My existence. And the longer I stayed silent, the more permanent it became. Brandon said we needed to go to the police. That this was identity theft, maybe even something worse. But when we tried, it didn't go how I expected. The officer was polite but skeptical. He asked for proof, ID, emails, anything to show who I really was. I gave them what I could, but with the accounts wiped and the passwords changed, all I had were fragments. Nothing official. And then they said something that made my stomach flip. We'll need to speak with your sister as well to hear her side. Her side. Like this was a disagreement. A misunderstanding. Not a calculated attempt to erase me. I walked out of that station feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. Julia hadn't just taken over my identity. She'd made sure no one would believe I ever had it to begin with. I hit rock bottom that night. I sat on Brandon's couch, wrapped in an old hoodie, staring blankly at the ceiling while my phone buzzed over and over again with messages I couldn't answer. People I hadn't seen in months, all reaching out to her version of me. I felt invisible in my own skin. But Brandon wasn't ready to give up. He said if Julia rewrote my life digitally, then we'd have to go analog, find proof she couldn't fake. So we made a list. School records. Medical files. Old photos. Handwritten letters. Yearbooks. Anything with a real timestamp. It wasn't easy. My mom, still confused and torn, let me borrow a few things from the attic at home. Brandon called in favors from mutual friends to dig up what they had. And bit by bit, we built a timeline Julia couldn't touch. But it wasn't until we went back to the hospital that everything changed. I asked for my medical records, the full log of my coma stay. It took days to process, but when it came through, there it was. A security log showing Julia had accessed my patient portal over a dozen times while I was unconscious, changing emergency contacts, responding to messages, updating the preferred contact number to hers. And even worse? A signed release form, digitally submitted using my name, giving her permission to make decisions on my behalf. Except I never signed it. That signature? Sloppy. Rushed. Not even close to mine. And it was time-stamped exactly 5 days after I slipped into a coma. We printed everything. Every message. Every forged file. Every stolen login. We compiled it into a physical binder, not digital. And we walked it straight into a lawyer's office. What followed moved faster than I expected. A cease and desist order. An identity restoration request. A restraining order application. Julia was served within the week. She didn't take it well. She showed up outside Brandon's place the next night. Just stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the window with this eerie, vacant look. She didn't say a word. Just watched. I didn't go out. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, she was the one on the outside looking in. And I was finally taking my life back. It took weeks. Rebuilding every profile, every contact, every part of my identity she had tried to erase. But I did it. Slowly. Deliberately. With receipts. People started realizing what happened. Some apologized. Most didn't. Julia disappeared after that. Vanished from social media. Moved out of town, from what I hear. I don't know where she is now. And honestly, I don't care. Because I'm back. And this time, there's no one left to rewrite me.